public praise, right? So there's this common element between all these external awards, because when I think of that, it's public things, right? Things for others to see, to show out there. People who do self-righteous service need to know that people see and appreciate their efforts. But true service is content in being hidden. Do you agree with that? True service is content in being hidden. Because I don't think you need the spotlight. I don't think you need all that attention. And people who seek true service don't seek that out either, right? Jesus noted that the Pharisees were in the habit of doing things to be seen by men. Right? They were out for the attention. They were out for their self-righteous purposes. Let's go to Matthew 6. I promise when I tested this on my computer, it looked fine. So Matthew chapter 6, first 4 verses. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Well, what is this left hand versus right hand thing? And what is Jesus talking about when he says, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing? What are your thoughts on his point with this? Because it's a little confusing to me.
Maybe don't brag on yourself.
Don't brag on yourself?
Silent servant is what I like to call. There are some people around here that are silent servants. They're doing stuff behind the scene and you have no idea. But I think, yeah, it's kind of like, they're not seen. You don't know that they're doing these things, but they are.
Doesn't need to be visible. It's silent service, right? Right. Your hands don't have minds of their own, but they are both instruments of your mind, right? So both hands represent you as the giver of service. The question's not so much what your hand is doing, like when you hand cash or a check, but it's about what your heart is thinking while your hand is doing it. So, 3 things we're doing. We're either seeking praise from others, quietly congratulating ourselves, or truly desiring God's approval alone. It's usually the 3 things when it comes to service. Is a self-righteous person concerned about their results? Yeah, I'd say they're highly concerned about their results. They're the kind of person that typically expects something in return. Now, I saw this picture yesterday and I wanted to include it because I thought it was appropriate. If you're helping someone and expecting something in return, you're doing business, not kindness. Do you agree with that? True service delights only in the service, only in the service itself, expecting nothing in return. Now, I'll ask a question here. If you feel like sharing, that's okay. Has anyone here actually had a bad experience in serving others? Think about it for a second. Has anyone had a bad experience in serving others? And it's okay, if you want to share. Maybe something didn't go according to where you thought? No? Tessa?
You can help some people and you feel like you've been taken advantage of. You don't feel like.
I've had instances of that too. Mm-hmm.
I've been in that situation before where a little bit more for what more can I get from that person? So it handicaps you sometimes and you won't want to serve other people. And what this person just doing it because they want something more from me.
Being taken advantage of and then coming back and wanting more, it kind of does hinder you from repeating, I guess.
We shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't think
Yeah.
that way.
I've had that happen.
Because God wants us to. Because they are going to take advantage of us.
And people will. Any other examples? Yeah, Jack.
Several occasions when we were sojourning, we were working with churches that said they wanted to grow. And they'd ask us to door knock, to advertise a vacation Bible school, to set up Bible studies, whatnot. But we did that gladly because the potential was always there.
Right.
But unfortunately, more often than not, what we saw was the church that wanted help growing was actually pursuing efforts, and pursuing doesn't necessarily indicate a whole lot of effort. But the things they were doing were actually counterproductive and were preventing them from growing. And so while we gladly did what they had asked to try to help them grow, on several occasions when we left town, we thought, I'm not sure that what we did really helped. We weren't doing it for the praise that they would heap on us, although they were always thankful when we'd come and helped. But our own metric was, is the church there becoming a little bit more like what Christ wanted it to be based on the scriptures, instead of essentially pursuing new Christians more in attendance. Critical questions that I asked some of them was, what would happen if a congregation of 20 or 25 people, what would happen if 6 people obeyed the gospel while we're here? What are you going to do then? Because they never had a plan for that. And so that was, on the one hand, discouraging. On the other hand, we know we're doing the right things, trying to help them. And the only satisfaction we could get was that we'd done what we could. We weren't sure it was going to help. That wasn't satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
We'd done what we could while we were there.
So when serving to help that particular church grow, you mentioned they didn't quite have plans, or did they already have their own agenda in mind?
More often than not, I think what they had was this vision of what this would produce, which was not realistic at all.
Because change is hard for almost everybody.
Well, everybody's comfortable doing what they normally do.
Yeah,
We're all in our comfort zones most of the time.
right,
I think we have a struggle in our minds, I know I do at times, about helping someone who visibly is in need, whether that person's really in need or whether you're perpetuating something that makes their situation even worse. And I know the answer, go ahead and help them, but
right.
that's always been a struggle in my mind.
And there's always a risk of, as you continue a perpetual help, is it developing a dependency, right? We struggle with that too. Yes, Jim?
Well, we need to wonder how God feels when he blesses us and we don't thank him.
Right. Think about what God wants.
I mean, the opportunities to serve, we should always be thankful for those. The fact that our service doesn't result in what we expected or what we'd like to see, that's not a grading sheet.
Right. It shouldn't be what we think it should be. It should be what's the benefit to God's kingdom, right?
Yeah. And if we're doing what we should be doing, the outcome is not in our hands.
Right.
You know, way too many, in that personal evangelism workshop we had in April, you know, we normally report the number of people baptized as a measure of the success of something. But that's God's part of that. If we're doing the teaching of people, that's our part.
Right.
And in every church we ever taught that in, we told them, said, you want to measure your success, measure the number of people you've taught. God will take care of the increase. Paul said that. He planted and Apollos watered. The increase is God's business. And you don't have to be there to see that. He'll take care of it if we take care of our part.
Right.
So, it's, you know, when you put that all together, it's kind of sobering that my service has to comply with what the Lord wants me to do.
Not what you want to do.
I don't have to be concerned about the results of it.
Right.
If I want to be, you know, we ran into it in Key West, Florida, and let me know if I'm taking too much.
Oh, you're fine.
Key West, Florida is a mecca for homeless people in the wintertime because the climate's pretty temperate. They can sleep in the parks. They don't need much other than maybe a cover to keep the moisture, the dew off of them, even in the wintertime. But the year we spent 2 months with them, they had been taught by a group in their Florida help that they were obligated to feed the homeless. So they asked me whether that was true or not. So I had to put together a lesson about that. And I wasn't sure that it was, I mean, I did an awful lot of research in the scriptures, wasn't sure the lesson was correct. And about 2 weeks after I taught that lesson, the Florida School of Preaching sent out a newsletter that had exactly the same analysis in it. So I thought, well, if I'm wrong, at least I've got company. Being wrong, but it was, you know, I'm asked a question, I wasn't prepared to address it, so I told them, I said, needed several weeks here to put a good lesson together on that. So we got it addressed while we were there, answered their concerns. But again, are we obligated to help everybody that asks for help? That was the kind of question they were asking. And there are real world limitations on that.
Yes, there are.
And that's what we had to apprise them of. You can do what you can't do more than you can do. God will take care of the parts you can't. So you do your part, ask him to take care of the situation after that. In all life situations, that's as far as we can go. Those that are sick, we can take a meal to them.
Yeah.
We can't heal them.
Right.
God will.
I bring up the question I asked y'all because I think sometimes when we stop serving, or maybe we limit our service, it's because of a past bad experience. You know, some people might say, I got burned, so I'm not going to do that again. And I go back to Jesus' example of when he was washing his disciples' feet. He did it knowing that one of them was going to betray him. Jesus died for all men, even though he knew that many would not serve him or even appreciate his sacrifice. And continuing on, self-righteous service picks and chooses whom to serve, but as I mentioned earlier, true service is indiscriminate. Romans 1:14. I am under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and to the foolish. Mark 9:35. And he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. True service is indiscriminate in its ministry. Self-righteous service is affected by your moods and your whims, meaning like you serve only when you have that feeling to serve. You have to feel moved. But true service ministers simply and faithfully because there is a need. You know, those whims and those occasional feelings to serve can actually be a hindrance. Because the services you are doing are then disciplining those feelings rather than allowing the feeling to control the service. I'll also point out that self-righteous service is temporary, okay? It functions only while the specific acts of service are being performed. Then, having served, it can rest easy. But true service is actually a lifestyle. It should be ingrained in our living and spring spontaneously to meet the needs of others. It's not something we should do for our own self-glory. And of all the Christian disciplines, service is the most conducive to the growth of humility. Every single day should be viewed as a day of humility. And how do we do this? By learning to serve others. I'm going to bring up something that William Law, back in the 18th century, wrote. If we want humility, we must condescend to all the weakness and infirmities of your fellow creatures, cover their frailties, love their excellencies, encourage their virtues, relieve their wants, rejoice in their prosperities, compassionate their distress, receive their friendship, overlook their unkindness, forgive their malice, be a servant of servants, and condescend to do the lowest offices to the lowest of mankind. And so, like I mentioned earlier as we started this morning, this isn't easy. That's a tall order. And this takes a daily discipline. But it brings a deeper love and joy in our God. But when it comes to service, we are naturally hesitant. This is the way we're wired. And it's understandable. Like I said, there's this fear of, if I do that, they're going to take advantage of me. They may walk all over me. And when that fear, that hesitancy, when that comes up, that's where we need to recognize and see the difference between choosing to serve and choosing to be a servant. When you choose to serve, you're in charge. When you choose to be a servant, you give up your right to be in charge. When you choose to be a servant, you're going to have to accept that people will take advantage of your kindness and your help. And you're going to get burned by some. It's just going to happen. But really, that shouldn't shock us because we understood the cost up front. 1 Corinthians 9:19. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. Notice the word might in this passage. When it comes to serving people, the Christian knows that there are no guarantees that the person will come to Christ or even remain saved. Yet we serve because we understand the value of simply being given the chance to be saved, because Jesus gave us that same opportunity. And when Jesus began to wash the disciples' feet, what was Peter's first natural reaction? He refused, right? John 13:8, Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Now, you might think that Peter's remark was a statement of humility, but in reality, it was really an act of pride. What Jesus was about to do was an affront to Peter's concept of authority, because if Peter had been the master, think about this, he would not have washed feet. Peter would not have washed feet if the roles were reversed. Like I said, true service is a lifestyle. It's not a list of things that we do. It's not a code of ethics. It's a way of living. It is one thing to act like a service. It is another to be a servant. Let me repeat that. It's one thing to act like a service. It's another to be a servant. And there's all kinds of acts of service. Okay? There's an act of service in hiddenness. Not every service needs to be publicly known. There are ministries that affect people who know nothing about them. Nothing about those ministries. But it impacts those people. There's acts of service in the small things. You can make something for someone. Make a sweater. You can, I think it was pointed out earlier, bring them a meal. There's acts of service in the small things. Protecting another's reputation. I'm talking about refusing to gossip or listen to gossip. Common courtesy. And what I'm talking about here is about having compassion and acknowledging the value of one another. Hospitality. Open your homes to one another just to have that chance to be together and share. Listening. This was an interesting statement. To listen to others quiets and disciplines the mind to listen to God. I like that statement. Bearing another's burdens and sorrows. Weep with those who weep. And finally, sharing the gospel. Those acts of service and sharing the gospel. Anything else pop to your mind as you see and read the bullets up here? Anything I missed? Any other acts of service? I think of one, having accountability partners is an act of service to the other person. There may be some other examples I'm not thinking about. The person who truly benefits from true service is the person doing the serving. Serving others without any thought of reward or praise is a great lesson in humility. So as I conclude a little earlier today, if anyone wants to share their thoughts, I'm going to leave you with this. Our risen Lord and Savior beckons us to the ministry of the towel. And the small acts of kindness and small acts of service. Beckons us to the ministry of the towel. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts about what's been shared or talked about today when it comes to service? Is it hard for some?
It's hard for me to accept help sometimes, but I want to be able to do it all myself. So I think sometimes it's been hard for me to if I've been sick or I've had babies, to have people come and do and help because I want to put them out or whatever. I remember a lady telling me that it's just, it's good for me too. Don't take away the joy I'm going to get from doing this by not letting me do it. She said, this is a joy for me. Let me do this for you. This is, like you said, it's good for your soul and your spirit to be able to do those things. You don't do it for that reason, but there's so many benefits to both sides of it.
Right.
So I thought, oh, well, okay, I guess you could bring me a meal that makes you so happy, I just felt like I was putting them out, and I'm like, if it brings her joy, I need to not feel bad about letting people do some things, sometimes.
Yeah, I've seen some people think about first pops in their mind is, do I have the time to do this? And so right there, you've already put a limitation on yourself and how much you want to do as far as service. Do I have the time to do this? Oh, this is going to take time for me. When am I going to schedule myself to do this? And that to me is a hindrance in your full potential of service. And then, another thing I was thinking about just now was, and I'm guilty of this myself, is I'm already thinking about how the outcome should play out when I shouldn't even worry about that, right? I should be leaving that in God's hands. I should do the service as I'm commanded to do and let God take care of the rest. Any other thoughts around service?
I think your list, I think I could conclude that the act of praying for other people is a form of service.
Yes, it is. I'm writing that one down. The act of praying is also another form of service. Jim, did you have something?
Romans 12 has a list of gifts. Service is one thing. So there's some people, to me, Richard and Teresa have the gift of service. Others, like myself, you have to struggle at it. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but we need to, if we don't have the gift, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Right. It shouldn't hold you back, right? Some people are naturally better at it, I don't know, or comfortable with it. It's tough. I mean, yeah. But don't let, because you will, you're going to face some experiences that are always going to be positive, right? That should still not stop you from serving, right? Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, that concludes class today. I think, who's up for next week? Willie, are you up next week? Yes. All right, you get to listen to Willie next week. All right. Thank you all.